Welcome back to Matters of Faith. We're talking to Abdul Hakim Murad, a great expert on one of the greatest scholars ever in the Islamic world, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. Now, you were mentioning how this important, this enormous scholar, the summit of the scholars, had self-doubts about his own intentions. And in fact, it went as far as him having a crisis, doubting himself so much that his intentions perhaps weren't pure, that he did it for his own glory rather than to please God. Now, what did he do, this great scholar, to correct himself?
Well, Ghazali is unusual amongst medieval Muslims in that he actually wrote about himself and his own experiences. He has a short autobiography. It's almost an autobiography, not quite. Some of it is slightly stylized, which he calls The Deliverer from Error, a title which seems to indicate that he wants other people to read it in order to be delivered from their own errors. It's not just his memoirs. And what the book doesn't tell us is the actual nitty-gritty of the policies, the spiritual techniques which he adopted in order to heal this catastrophic crisis that had deprived him even of the power of speech. But we can more or less extrapolate and work out what he was doing, because he was not original in heading for the desert and looking for certainty in solitude and meditation. It was a very widespread practice of the time. In fact, the deserts were kind of full of people who were out there looking for truth and looking to get away from the rat race. What people would do in that situation, which was called siyahat, which means travelling for the sake of God, would be to leave behind them all of their distractions and attachments and confusions and the million and one things that fill up our minds and our lives with useless futilities, in order to clear the mind of that so that one can actually focus and the mind can be a single thing rather than a lot of thoughts jumping around in different directions with its actual coherence and even the soul itself being lost sight of. So he was looking for clarity, for a settling of the mud in the heart so that the heart would once again be like a pure lake which could fulfill its original function. He has this rather beautiful image of the human soul as being like a lake or a reservoir that is always polluted because the five senses are bringing in all kinds of rubbish. You look at this, you hear that, and the mind imagines the other. And therefore, at every moment, you're kind of distracted, and hence the soul is polluted, it's muddy, it's turbid. And he says what you have to do is to cut yourself off from all of those things that are bringing in this confusion, this turbulence. And then it will finally settle down as sediment, and the water will be pure again. And then you can see what the lake is for, which is to reflect the light of heaven. It's pure and it can perform its function, which is to be a kind of mirror. The human soul is supposed to be a mirror which reflects the light of God, and there's hadith which indicate this. But the mirror is polluted by our sins, stupidity, absent-mindedness, laziness, all of the stuff that we do. So what he's saying is you have to engage in what he calls tajreed, which means stripping away. Get rid of those attachments, get rid of those preoccupations, the quest for prestige and for status and for money and for all of that rubbish, which is just distracting you from being cool and calm and limpid and yourself. And he expresses this actually in terms of coming alive. He says that when we're at the mercy of our worldly attachments, we're not fully living. We're kind of in a daze, in a half-somnolent state of being a sleepwalker. We're not really paying attention to where we are. But religion is there in order to wake us up. And the Quran says, Allah is calling you lima yuhyikum, to what gives you life. But we know, because of the fact that he eventually leaves the desert and goes back to his family and goes back to the city and starts teaching again and does all of his old things, that Islam is not about running away from your responsibilities and running away from the world. And we have the example of the Holy Prophet who, having been in the presence of God on the night of the Ascension, returns to the hassle of space and time and Quraysh and the idols and all of the rubbish that he has to deal with. Why? Because he is a responsible human being who wants to help others. And just as the Holy Prophet comes back because it's his duty and his privilege and his joy to help others, although he'd rather be with God, Imam al-Ghazali comes out of the desert back into society in order to try and help others. And the Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious sciences, his great, huge, heavy encyclopedia, his manifesto, is all about his invitation to us to come alive again. That's why he calls it Ihya, bringing to life the disciplines of religion. He says, what is a worse catastrophe than to go through your life in a state of kind of comatose distraction? That's not what we were created for. We were created to be alert. Our lives may be really simple and uneventful, but it's better to be aware of yourself, your mortality, your family, who you are, truly alive, than to be a billionaire who's kind of worried and distracted and confused and stressed out all the time and never fully centered in himself. So it's a radical agenda, but you can see why it's attractive and why it has appealed to so many people.
He was called a mujaddid, a renewer of religion. Could you tell us a little bit about the concept of renewer of religion?
Yes, it's interesting in that Islam believes that human history is revived by prophets, but that within the lifespan of a prophetic religion, as it were, there can be smaller renewals. And in Islam, these individuals who bring that about are called mujaddid, which just means renewer. And universally, the scholars of Islam and the historians say that Imam al-Ghazali was the renewer of the 5th Islamic century. And people were saying that even during his own lifetime. When they look at the criteria, what's the checklist for being a renewer, they will say it doesn't mean that you write the best book that's ever existed on theology or that you win an amazing battle. It has to be a revival of the religion in its sort of holistic totality. And that's particularly what Imam al-Ghazali did, because he wanted to renew the community politically and ethically and spiritually and intellectually and in every possible way, and to bring back the original primal wholeness and mutuality that existed in the souls of the companions of the Prophet, for whom there was no separate science of theology and then law and logic, and everything was just deen, everything was religion. So the mujaddid, the renewer in Islamic history, is the one who shows the coherence of all of the different parts of religion and the way in which they together lead to the immense simplicity which is the sunnah of the Holy Prophet.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about your new work. You are, in fact, very much involved. You've always been involved for so long in Ghazali's work. You've published books about Ghazali, and now you've got a series called Traveling Light. Can you tell us about this?
That's right. I mean, this has a number of reasons. One reason is that al-Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin is a big book, even by medieval standards. It's actually 40 books. Not many of us have time to read a text that you can hardly lift, especially the young people. We're all busy. The format nowadays is MP3, it's audio, it's iPods, it's DVDs. And so what this is an attempt to condense the essence of the Ihya into 40 hours of lectures, given by different lecturers in different places, so that people at least get the essence, the gist of the Ihya in a format that they're comfortable with. So they come home from work and they're tired and they don't really want to pick up a book and look at footnotes, but they can just about summon up the energy to turn on the DVD player, and there's, we have nice songs in it and beautiful places and nice mosques, and it's kind of visually very striking. And then they get the message of Imam al-Ghazali. Because of where we are culturally, this is the way in which he has to speak to our generation.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful speaking to you.
Thank you.
We learned so much about how to transform our lives, how to awaken, thanks to al-Ghazali. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for inspiring us here on Matters of Faith, and may this traveling light travel far and wide. Thank you very much for being with us here on Matters of Faith, and we shall see you again very soon. Goodbye.